We've got a panel session coming up now, and for those of you who are planning to remain, please do. It's going to be chaired by a fabulous lady who is the chairman of GlobalWelsh, which is an organization that is pulling together the diaspora across the globe to represent Wales in as many places as we have diaspora. She's also been the chief executive of her own communication company for about 22 years, I think. So this, unsurprisingly, is about AI. So, Nan, may I ask you to come up with your panelists, and I'll do some intros and then pass the chair to you. This whole question of transformation and use of AI is really the sort of the linchpin of today's conversation. And so we're delighted to have this group of experts and Nan Williams to chair this moment. Nan, I'll pass the proverbial baton to you. Thank you.
Lovely, Aled. Thank you very much, and bore da, everybody. So I'm Nan Williams, chair of GlobalWelsh, pulling the diaspora together, as Aled said, and I run my own marketing services company, and my prime role at the moment is AI transformation. So as well as being very interested, I'm somewhat intimidated by my fellow experts here on the panel, and we're going to talk specifically about responsibility and transparency in AI. So can I ask you each to introduce yourselves, your institutions, and the work that you do briefly, and also to answer my first question, which is, why do you think it's so important to be right here, right now, in this room, talking about responsibility and transparency? Albert.
Thank you very much, Nan. It's great to be here. The first thing I want to say is thank you for the warm welcome. For those I haven't met yet, my name is Sabater, and I'm the director of the Observatory for Ethics in Artificial Intelligence of Catalonia, which is one of the pillars of Catalonia AI, the Catalan strategy for artificial intelligence, along with innovation, capacity building, and research. And what really drives me here is the fact that to a certain extent, or to a greater extent, we share a great deal of interests, and we have to learn more about each other, and particularly about the things that concern you, but also excite you about technology. So it's great to be here, but also it's really good to hear all the questions that you're already posing or you're putting forward to the speakers, because that demonstrates that we share quite a lot of the things, not only here in Wales, but also in Catalonia. So thank you.
Matt.
Yeah, also, I'm really pleased to be here. I'm Matt Jones, and I'm the research lead for the UK government's Responsible AI programme. We only launched in May. It's a substantial investment by UKRI. And picking up what the Minister is saying, our job as RAI UK is to start a national conversation to fund and curate research and innovation that will help all of us understand a bit more what that word, responsible AI, means. And why now? Why this moment? Why is the UK government investing? And why are we here? I think we're at a really, really urgent and pressing moment, right? There are a lot of people I meet who've got nothing to do with tech, who feel like AI is going to degrade them, going to defeat them, going to extract from them. And I think we all have a responsibility to lift everyone's heads up and to remind everyone, whatever their involvement or no involvement in AI, the most important technology of all is you. And to see how AI can platform responsibly the future where we are the prime entity and not some weird algorithm. That's why I'm here.
Great. Ben.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Ben Stoffelen. I lead the AI department at OEIAC, which is a Flemish research and technology organization from Belgium, mainly focusing on semiconductor technologies and digital technologies as well. I think, as the colleagues here mentioned already, we've never been so high on the hype cycle of AI, ever. Comes with a tremendous amount of challenges, which we at OEIAC believe, and in Flanders as well, requires total solution thinking. We need to see what we can do and how we can bring these solutions into the reality where day-to-day businesses are working with them in a responsible and trustworthy way. So really looking forward to the panel here.
Great. I wanted to start off by asking a question about, what is responsible AI and what is trustworthy AI? And if we can make that as practical as possible for those of us in the room who run businesses or organizations. Matt, do you want to start?
Yeah, okay. So when I was growing up, my parents used to say to me, be responsible. And that, you might have had the same, right? And that kind of gave me a knee-jerk reaction, thinking that means boring, that means limiting, that means nannying. That's not what I mean by responsible AI. I guess what my parents were actually saying was, grow up. And responsible AI for me, and perhaps for you, is to look at the first part of that word, which is response. How can we ensure in the tech you build, the policies you create, the interactions and services you provide, how can you ensure that those are responding to the real needs, the real values, the real talents of your customers and of your citizens? For me, it's about responding rather than, if you like, inflicting technology on people.
And Ben, I know you talk a lot about transparency as well, and transparency in algorithms, et cetera, et cetera. How does that play into the debate?
Well, I think we should also look at research and development in a kind of transparent way and be able to get access to all of the novel models that are coming on the horizon, but also in terms of computational power. I think we need to be able to scrutinize from the research onwards really the abilities of these models to change our lives in the future. And in that sense, not only be transparent to the end user, but also be very transparent in when the research is being done and development is being done, to be able to have access from all other kind of areas and be able to really evaluate properly. I think that includes a lot of transparency as well there.
Okay. And from the Spanish perspective, what's the debate on responsibility in Spain and Catalonia at the moment?
It's very important because traditionally, when we were talking about responsible AI, one would think about privacy by design, thinking about the issues that to a certain extent are taking into account safety and non-maleficence. So the system to a certain extent can basically anticipate whether or not there will be negative impact, and therefore one should do something about it. But these days, responsible AI is also about an iteration process. It's about anticipating the social impact of technology on people's lives. And that basically means that you have to bring up the issues of inclusivity. You have to really listen to all the stakeholders to see whether or not the technology will actually be implemented in a way that is successful, but not successful from the point of view of one particular agent, one particular stakeholder, but particularly successful from a societal point of view. That's responsible AI. And also it's trustworthy AI because that means that it builds trust between stakeholders. There's no successful technology unless there is trust. And we know that not only from this particular AI industry, we know that from the aviation industry, from the transport industry, as well as from the food industry. If there is no trust, people do not buy those products. So it's very important that we reflect on responsible AI as a way to really bring some of the issues that we already know from other industries to make sure that we drive change positively and have a very impactful change for people's lives.
I mean, I think that's really fascinating, and also I look from outside and look in about the global regulatory framework, the EU, the UK, Wales, and your regions as well. How do you think that's going to play out in a regulatory sense, and organisations to look after safety as well as responsibility? Ben, do you have a view on that?
I think when it comes to safety, we should have all the guardrails there to ensure that safety. But we all need to do this together. One region or one area focusing on a specific point and really driving regulations there, then moves to another area where the regulations are differently. It needs to be in a global initiative where we all strive towards the same, as Albert mentioned, the safe, kind of trustworthy and responsible AI, which ensures our safety throughout the entire process.
And what do you think the challenges are? What are the difficulties in achieving that?
Well, it's an ever-changing landscape at the moment. So 2 years ago, or even 10 years ago, the hype was not that high as it is today. 2 years ago, no one ever heard of generative AI. So it's a fast-moving landscape that we quickly need to pick up with, and in legislation or regulatory sense, that's hard to catch up with. But from my semiconductor background as well, I think there's an opportunity there to look at a full system implementation and couple that hardware with software together and make that in sort of like a system to ensure that safety in the end. There's a lot of potential there.
Matt?
I think one of the big issues, and if you listen to the kind of some of the rhetoric about how we're going to get to a good place for AI, it's all about as soon as we can get the machine to align to our values, then everything will be all right. Now, I have to say, and it's obvious, isn't it? We've had millennium of people fighting for different views of what it is to be a good citizen and have a good society. So we're never going to get there. We're never. There are so many different cultures, so many different perspectives, so many different views of what safety even means, or privacy. So the way forward is to ensure that we have a diverse, respectful, and humble debate. I mean, a lot of AI, and I've been in this world for a long time, comes from a very limited perspective. If you like, it's the global California perspective. Flip over your mobile phone. It probably says, designed in California. We have to absolutely ensure that the future AI doesn't have that stamp on it. Because if it does, then we're not going to have something that is trusted and safe worldwide. We need designed in Newport, designed in Dharavi, designed in Mumbai, whatever it is, but bringing together multiple voices. That conversation that the minister was talking about.
And Albert, when it's all moving so fast, though, how do we achieve that, and what part can we play?
It's definitely one of the biggest challenges, the acceleration of technology. And that is accompanied by a sense of inevitability. That is probably even worse than the acceleration itself, because it means that we are not able to comprehend what is happening. Or we leave what is happening to some agents, some very powerful agents, many of them based in Silicon Valley, to decide what AI, sort of AI we'll actually have. There's no single AI. There are many AIs in the first place that we have to, as Matt was saying, that we have to consider. And all those AIs are very specific and solve very particular problems in particular contexts to particular individuals. That's one of the things that we need to consider. We do not have to basically throw out the window all the AIs that are non-generative, for example. There's plenty of AI, and probably many in the room will be doing AI systems that have nothing to do with the latest wave of AI. Does it mean that we are now old-fashioned, those who do AI in a more symbolic way? No. So we have to be careful about all this acceleration. And we have to embrace things that, to a certain extent, change people's lives for the better. And sometimes it's a very basic thing. It's automating criteria. It's predicting something or having a better perception about how things work, because we're not able as humans to see what machines can do. But we have to think about the context, and we have to leave the acceleration and the sense of inevitability sideways. We have to very much focus on what really matters for people.
Yeah. And let's talk a little bit more in practice. I noticed earlier we had some questions, about in education, bringing it back to very personal level. Where do you see the risks for the citizen, and how that can be, negotiated through these structures? Where are the risks for organizations, government organizations, and where are the risks for businesses? And what happens if we don't get this global cooperation in place? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm just reflecting, and that's why I paused. I mean, the biggest risk is being blinded by the light of this seductive technology. The biggest risk is not looking at your kids and seeing innate, incredible, unique creations and trying to produce not just a system, a piece of technology, but the societal infrastructure that will platform those lives to become wonderful, who knows what entities in the world. Because, if we really think we want to have an AI that is better than you or me or others? What's the motivator for that? Why would we want to do that? Of course we don't. So the big risk is governments and policymakers and perhaps even educators getting so excited that they forget what they should be focusing on. Same in healthcare. It's really easy. I do lots of work with radiologists. It's amazing what you can do, isn't it, with machine learning to assist the radiologist. But if you are blinded by that technology and forget about the key things that matter in healthcare, which is care and people relating to others, then we'll be losing the opportunity. I really think that the Wales in particular, because of its history, and then reaching out internationally, can be a beacon where we stand up and say, we are going to produce the best tech in the world, but we're going to build things which amplify our people, our citizens, and societies. So the risk is being blinded by the light.
Okay. And what about from both of your perspectives, same question, and how does that look through your cultural lens in the regions you are from? Ben?
So I think very similarly to Matt, that we need to stay very focused on what addition this AI brings to the overall goal. I think a very personalized track in education, for example, needs to be complemented with a sense of community building. Being in a classroom with other children has benefit. It doesn't need to be everyone by themselves staring into an iPad having a very personalized learning experience. There is something in the interaction, in the social aspects as well. So we need to be very aware of the environment where we put these AI systems in. At the same time, I think we also need to strive for some basic elements where we are able to tweak the AI. For example, Flanders is very heavily on the data economy, on safeguarding personal data. I think these are initiatives that can be taken so that the personal data does not get exploited within these AI systems. These are things that happened before, that enable it to be built, but at the same time, while the AI is being built, we need to be aware of the environment where it will land and try to make the best kind of combination out of these factors.
What about in Spain?
I think there is an element of comfort that some of the stakeholders now require, or guidance, if you like, that goes beyond the recommendations. And that's, to a certain extent, the way of leveling the playing field through legislation. There is the AI Act coming, and we know that to a certain extent that will give some sense of what we have to do in order to comply with the recommendations, some of them ethical, some of them about social impact. But that's very important for the government of Catalonia, because it will, to a certain extent, give guidance about what we should do and where we should actually invest, and heavily, to make sure that the technology that we want makes a difference for people's lives. We know that there will be some AI systems that will be prohibited, and therefore it will be absolutely a waste of money to dedicate resources to those sort of systems, like surveillance and manipulation and so on and so forth. But we know that it does have a huge impact in sectors like education, in health, healthcare, transport, and security. Therefore, we should invest very heavily there. And in some cases, as I said before, we should not only think about AI systems that are driven by Gen AI, or if you like, huge amounts of data to actually solve all our problems. We need to make sure that there are a range of systems that can do lots of things. And we can invest in those as well.
And you mentioned there the EU Act, and we can see the different in Congress and people going to the White House talking about we have our own summit coming up in November at Bletchley Park. Where's that all going to land in your view? Impossible question, but where's it going to land, and how do companies in the room prepare for that? And how can we prepare ourselves for that regulatory environment when it's so fluid? Right.
Yeah, so my practical answer is engage with Responsible AI UK. We'll be at the Fringe, which is happening in London, and then at the AI Summit. The Responsible AI is there for companies and for researchers and for citizens to connect. We have funding, we have programs, and we want to hear from as many people as possible. And part of our work is to provide impartial advice and policy frameworks for the UK and beyond, but very much informed by discussions with colleagues and with other things that obviously are going on in the EU and the USA. The Prime Minister, of course, wanted to bring this summit in order to put a stake in the ground to say that the UK is a good place to be thinking about good AI use. But I think we can broaden that out. We've got colleagues here in the room, and I've spoken to others in the hallway. There are lots of people from whatever your background that really want to see this technology platforming human agency, human creativity, and the future. And so where it should land is by that careful, considerate, and humble debate. And then there will be regulations in Wales and in the UK and then across the EU. And hopefully we can learn from each other on that.
And from a EU perspective, how
Yeah, so
are you preparing?
I'm really hoping that from a research perspective, we can be very open and be very scrutinizing towards all of the systems. When we move up to deployment with end users, for example, I'm hoping that the discussions we're having right now with the OEIAC, for example, give some sense of structure to the debate. So I'm very much a fan of these levels of risk, for example, to start categorizing where we want to go. On the other hand, with new technologies coming in, these kind of frameworks get adjusted. The place for foundational models or generative AI or general purpose AI has not really found a place yet therein and creates sort of a category of its own. So from that point on, I truly believe that's a conversation, that we need to be flexible and be able to adapt these kind of elements to always keep these responsible AI in mind, and then have that discussion be part of a lot of players from industry, from research, from government, all interacting on where it is going and how it can be adopted and how it will be adopted into the future. That then guides, again, the next set of guide rails, for example, an open conversation.
I think it's a very important point because to a certain extent, we know that the legislation will have a big impact. For some people, will be kind of a deterrent to new technology. But we've seen in previous decades that's not the case. Innovation is almost inevitable in that respect. Every time you have legislation, there's more innovation on how to actually make things work. So I'm quite optimistic from that point of view. One of the things that I do somehow worry, but we are trying to do something about it from the Catalan perspective, is to make sure that all the companies, the enterprises, as well as government, have the tools and the checklists to actually see whether or not they comply with the law. When it comes to legislation, we know that implementing legislation is costly. There will be auditing, there'll be a lot of requirements to make sure that the stakeholders really comply with the law. And that's very, very, sometimes very costly, as I said. So you have to offer stakeholders a way to self-assess constantly technology before there are greater demands. And these greater demands might come actually from an agency, a particular agency. But we have to provide these sort of tools and checklists so that people don't have to spend a huge amount of money and time to see whether or not their systems are safe, are transparent, are just, and actually offer the best possible solution for people's lives.
I mean, one of the risks, I'm a great fan of regulation and rules and principles, but we should take the warning, I think, of GDPR. So, clearly it's a really important framework. But I don't know about your organization. I certainly know about the ones I work in. There's a lot of misunderstanding and then a misapplication and almost a kind of like smothering of some of the things that we want to do because of you can't do that because of GDPR. Now, if you know GDPR well, there are many things it is there to empower and facilitate. So what I'm hoping is that the checklist, the rules, the policies that are produced around AI, that we are all involved in it and we understand what it actually means for our organizations. So don't go away from here and then wait for several years until these regulations come up. Keep your antennae out, keep your voices in, and then when they do unfold, make sure that your organizations are using those new regulations not to stop and stifle innovation, but to do it in a valuable, safe, trustworthy way. Let's not hope we get another kind of GDPR mess.
Yeah, so maybe to add on that one, I think you need, as a company, to have some sort of a legal certainty. Yeah. And that can be achieved through these tools I think Albert mentioned. Doing sandboxing exercises, regulatory sandboxing exercises, some prototyping, to be able to interact with policy that's either in the making or that's already established, so that as a company you can have this legal certainty that you're implementing it in the right way and assessing in the right way. I think GDPR was a very legal and prescriptive kind of thing. Here with the OEIAC, I think we have the opportunity to do this more in this kind of sandboxing way so that we're able to interact with it and be more able to adopt it easily and start living the principles that underlie it and that shape out trustworthy and responsible AI.
Yeah, okay. I'm interested as well in, we've talked for so long about the digital divide. For countries, regions, and for citizens, are we embarking on an AI divide as well? How might that play out, and how can the responsibility debate mitigate that if we get it right?
There is certainly that possibility. In fact, we see already an AI divide which is more geographical, more context-based in terms of the amount of investment. Some countries are certainly pouring lots of money in AI, and some others can't because it's very costly. However, the recipients of AI, or if you like, the users of AI, will also see a similar type of digital divide. And that's where reskilling strategies, where education, where training really matters. And we have to dedicate a lot of investment, and governments have to do that very quickly to make sure that their citizens don't feel like lagging behind. And that's urgent. It's very urgent. And it's part of the ethical debate. Is it ethical not to invest money at this particular point in time and to see the ethical issues later on, to solve some of these particular issues in the future? Certainly not. We have to make sure that people are empowered to actually have critical thinking and to actually validate the outputs and results from AI in a way that make them better, not worse. But that requires investment. And for that very reason, the Catalan government is actually investing heavily in education, even though we know that some stakeholders might want us to invest more heavily in other sectors, but it's critical to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there are two issues. One is, so we did a lot of work in Southern Africa, and there's a language, Xhosa, which is spoken by millions of people. But until recently, if you wanted to do speech recognition, which is my passion, or speech synthesis, then you weren't going to get that. A language which is part of millions of people's culture, not represented. Why is that? The answer is most Xhosa speakers are, by our standards, poor. And so companies can't monetize that and sell services to them. So we need to address that, obviously. We need to produce perhaps open source tools which will allow communities and cultures to gather their own data and create their own models so they have AI for their own purposes. The second reason why we need to avoid this digital divide is the one that we've all been talking about from the keynote onwards, the need to diversify perspectives. I travel to lots of places around the world beyond that Californian perspective, and I see incredible forms of entrepreneurship, innovation, ideas, and data. By including those into the mix, we are going to get better technologies for everyone across the globe. So absolutely there's a divide. We need to address it for practical and indeed principled reasons.
Ben, your perspective?
I can only agree with the other colleagues here. So I think generative AI has put a magnifying glass on this divide. You've never needed so much data as right now to be able to train the models. The models have never been so complex as they are now. And they've also, in some sense, has never been so unpredictable or untransparent as they are right now. So I think they've been accessible to a few from a data perspective to really understand how they are built, but also on a computational level. Very few countries even have facilities that are able to really openly allow for these models to be trained. So I think that certainly is a divide there as well. We need to have the tooling on the one hand, but also have the infrastructure in place so that we can really have everyone interacting with these kind of models and technologies, but also have this data accessibility that we can have all the different variations in that as well. I think that's something that we really need to focus on.
I was hearing a lot of talk about, just the ability to access compute capacity by nation is becoming a bigger and bigger divide, right?
Yeah.
Across nations. So before I ask the last question and hopefully have some questions from the audience, I just wanted to ask, from a Welsh perspective, we're here Wales Tech Week, what does that mean for Wales in particular? And Matt, maybe it's a fairer question for you.
Yeah, so,
where are we on this scale?
So I'm not sure this will answer your question, but my grandparents, my male grandparents, were miners in Treherbert and Treorchy. I live in Swansea. 5 miles from there is the Hafod. Both places, the valleys and the Hafod, were part of the Industrial Revolution, right? They created materials that were important and shaped the livelihoods of many around the world. But if you don't know, it was a very dark time as well. If you Google now pictures of the Hafod in the 1700s, it was full of smoke, full of soot. Those technologies were extractive. Those technologies were exploitative, and they've left a scar on the psyche and the land of Wales. So what do I hope for Wales now? Well, if you go to the Hafod now, it's green, it's open, it's wonderful, it's human. The slag heaps of the valleys have gone, they've been grassed over, and Wales is a place of the future. So what I hope is Wales will be, with colleagues around the world, be a central part of ensuring that we get this new industrial revolution, these new materials, but ones where people are not feeling that they're being exploited, extractive, and there won't be scars, but much more benefits for all in the years to come. And I'm sure Wales can play a central part in that with the help of colleagues and with all of you from wherever you're from.
Great, thank you. So my final question to all three of you before we take some audience questions is, what can we in the audience do to engage with this debate on responsibility and transparency? We're all very practical people. We want to be engaged, but there are such a range of things and players on this platform. What can we all do? Ben, let's start with you.
So I think the keynote speaker mentioned to research. I think being educated and getting as much information as possible of where we are currently, where we are really, not just in terms of a hype, but what can really be done. And then interacting with programs that are being initiated, such as the Responsible program that Matt mentioned. I think these are some very practical things to do. So educate, assess where in your daily lives or in your companies AI can play a role or is already playing a role, and then try to reach out in a community sense and discuss where to move forward from there.
Right, Albert.
I think one of the probably issues that I would mention or highlight is that all these disruptive technologies have the capacity to polarize audiences, and that's sometimes inevitable. So we need to perhaps think about constructively about how to make technology better, but also context-based. When you were asking Matt about what is really important for Wales, we have a great deal of things in common. We have our own languages. In Wales, we have Welsh. In Catalonia, we have Catalan. And other parts of the world, like here, we have Flemish. And these AIs will not do very well if they don't take those things into consideration. But that requires investment. We have to train large language models with lots of voices from all sorts of places, from different class backgrounds. Otherwise, they will not understand. And we remember, we pose the questions. They give us outputs, but we give them the questions. If those questions aren't good enough, the results will be really bad. But it will be especially bad if they don't understand our questions in Welsh, in Catalan, or in English.
And for me, number one, stop worrying about general purpose AI. It is never, ever coming, and I'm hoping this is going to be recorded, not in my lifetime, not in my kids' lifetime, and not in our grandkids' lifetime. And why would it? And number two, think about the pressing challenges and opportunities right now. There are things that machine learning and AI are doing which are very, very bad, like disinformation. and also very, very good. And the third thing, go to rai.ac.uk, join our national conversation, join our strategy board, get funding from us. Together, and only together, will we have the right solution. There is no one clear answer. We all need to be involved.
Okay, great. So do we have questions from the audience? Anybody, just stick up your hand if you've got a question for the panel. Yeah, my question right here.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for your views. I wanted to explore one more question, building on Hannah's question around international collaboration and the diverging approaches, because sort of we spoke briefly about the OEIAC, we spoke briefly about the GDPR. With data protection, I think the stakes were slightly lower and the EU got in quite early. Right now, you sort of have three approaches coming up around the world. You have the rights-driven approach in the EU, which is sort of based on the GDPR. You have a more sort of market-driven approach in the States, where it's more sort of, let's be a bit more pro-innovation, let's not hinder the companies too much. And then you have a state-driven approach in China. And I wonder if you look 5 years, in 5 years' time, how do you see that cooperation, or how do you see the clashes between those approaches play out potentially, and what concerns you have that, you know, how actually you foster international cooperation with those three sort of emerging approaches at the same time?
Good question. Did you get that? Albert, what do you think?
It's certainly very difficult to answer that question. In my view, from the European perspective, there's no way we're going to embrace the Chinese model or even the American model. From the point of view, or at least from the perspective of trust, we have to consider what users, recipients of technology will want in a few years' time. I think this is only the beginning. People will want more transparency about what sort of industry we end up having in Europe that allows AI to prosper. Certainly competition is out there. It's a global competition, but we already anticipate another, if you like, Brussels effect, like with the GDPR, despite the fact, as Matt said, sometimes it's a real burden for businesses. But are we better with or without GDPR? That's what some of my colleagues say from Europe. I think we're probably better off having GDPR, and we'll probably be better off having the AI Act. However, will that stifle competition? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that, and I don't see whether we'd be, from the European perspective, we would be happy to implement a model that China or the US have here, because people might want to have, or might actually think that's not good enough for us.
I think we're not going to end up with one set for all domains, right? If you think about other parts of life, so sometimes, say, for weapons, we already have established ways of, if you like, managing the competitive desire of nations to destroy each other. You know, we've done that to some extent with the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty. So we might need that kind of approach for certain types of AI, obviously those that are targeting the defense of a nation. But then on the other side, if you think about the scientific kind of collaborative model that pushes forward health and well-being agendas. You know, we have colleagues in China, we have colleagues in Japan, we have colleagues in the States who work together, don't we, to try and make the world better so that cancer is cured and people's livelihoods are uplifted. So I think those kind of models will work very effectively for that kind of AI. So I think we've got to try and break ourselves away from one sense of a model and think about what will be valuable in different sectors.
Great, thank you. I think we're probably out of time, this clock's telling me.
Lunch.
But thank you very much to all three of you from your perspectives. And I think collaboration and exploration of all the avenues are the watchwords for us all today. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you.
Thank you.